Welcome back, everybody. I'm here again with Pastor Gary and Beth, and today we're going to jump a little bit off of our last episode about kingdom marriage, and we're going to talk about raising kingdom kids.
Awesome.
So what does that look like? How do we even go about having kingdom children?
Is it possible even?
Is it possible?
Is it possible? Can I jump in?
Sure, go ahead.
I always think when I start talking about kingdom children or Christian children, raising our children the way that we should for the Lord, then I always go back to Proverbs 22:6, and I like it in the old in King James, and it says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and even or when he's old, he won't depart from it." Well, the margin of my King James Bible says, "Even when he's old."
Yeah.
And some of the older translations and say they have that. And so the point being that it's saying that if I train them right now, then later on they won't forget it. Even when they're old, they'll still be living by those same right principles. Now that word train actually had an implication to the Hebrew people, because it was originally written in Hebrew. We have to understand that. And that word train talked about the same kind of thing that a mother would do when she would wean a child off the breast. She would chew the food because they didn't have food processors, and then she'd take that already chewed food, she'd put it in a baby's mouth and touch the palate at the back of their mouth, causing them to swallow, which would create a hunger for solid food. So that being said, that word train means to touch the palate or to create hungers. So if you train a child in the way they should go, you're going to create the hungers that a child should have. And even when they're old, they won't depart from those same hungers. So if I can train my child to love the Word of God, if I can train my child to love the presence of God, if I can train them to love the things of God and the kingdom, then even when they're old, they'll still be living with that love for God and His kingdom and all of that. So that's a really fundamental. That's where I go right away when you start talking about that's my responsibility, is to make sure that the right things, the right hungers are being begun in them.
And that makes it sound like your kids don't have to go through a rebellious phase.
They don't really have to. A lot of people think, well, so when they read that, they read when they're old, they'll come back to the Lord. Well, and listen, if no condemnation, if something's going on with your children or your house or things that your children they fall away from the Lord, pray, believe God that those foundations that you put there, that the word that is in there will not return void, but it will accomplish what it's sent out to do. He's watching over His word to perform it in them. So believe God with that promise for them. But at the same time, if we read that promise properly, we can know that there is this supernatural thing happening by the grace and the empowerment of God, that our children don't have to go sow their wild oats and then come back. They can actually live for God all those years in between.
Praise God.
So that's pretty cool.
I think about Abraham, and the Lord said to Abraham that He commanded him because he would train his children after him, first of all, and that He would teach them to do justice and judgment, which comes down to thinking right and acting right. So first of all, He said that Abraham would live that out in front of them. And that's an important thing. We need to live out our Christianity in front of our children in a humble way. When we mess up, we need to be able to say, hey, I messed up. When
there's a lot of integrity to that.
There is a lot of integrity to that. And then as our children mature and grow, and we've planted all of these things in them from children through into preteen and teenage and into adulthood, then what we're doing is we're teaching them to think according to the Word of God, to think according to the principles of the Word of God, so that they can have a biblical worldview. And then as they begin to think that way, then their actions will line up into that. Because it's not just about do one thing and not the other thing. It's about equipping them as they come into adulthoods to be able to adulthood to be able to take the Word of God and apply it to how society changes over the years.
Right.
Society is not the same from as it was when my grandparents were little. It's not the same, and it won't be the same in 2 or 3 generations as it is now.
No.
There will be new things
That's really
that
good.
need to be worked through. How do we apply the Bible, the principles of the Word, to all of these new things that are coming at us in society? And that's all about raising kingdom children. It's a wonderful privilege, and it's a challenge.
Totally.
Because it's not a simple thing. It's almost like it evolves with you as you as you're parenting growing children.
Yep.
It evolves with you.
Yeah.
Because there's always new challenges that come.
And we're not saying that the principles change.
Oh no, the principles
The Word
are
of
the
God
same.
is the Word of God, and the principles are the same today as they were when it was written. The difference is that we're applying it to whole different things. I mean, when I look at the society that's here now that I'm 50, as compared to what it was when I was 20 and 25, it's a whole other society.
Yeah.
Just without getting into particular things, but now all of a sudden, our kids are having to deal with, things. They're dipping into the gene pool and making decisions about, what's
Can we clone?
cloning and all of those things. And these are decisions that, they talked about science fiction stuff when I was a kid, but nobody was really there yet. And now we're there. There's decisions they have to make. And so to be able to take the Word and the principles of that Word and apply it to these whole new situations. You think about information and the internet, and how it's just sped up. They have things to deal with that we didn't have to deal with. And so, but at the same time, we had things to deal with that they didn't have to deal with.
That's true.
It's just a different world. And so you have to be able to take that, get it so down on the inside of you that you know how to make those decisions, which is one of the other things when it comes to parenting, is that oftentimes within the church we have started out training children and saying we have to tell them what to do here and tell them what to do there, and there's a stage when they're really young that you just tell them what to do, but there's a shift that happens in their early teens, mid-teens, late teens, where you have to take that whole process of, and she was talking about it, where it's no longer just telling them what to do, but you move into a season where you're helping them to make the right decisions, you're counseling them, you're helping them to have the information and to evaluate it, and then getting them into the season where, they're making their own decisions so that they can serve God. But it all begins in those stages when you're creating the right hungers, when you're creating the right desires, and you're showing them how you do it within your life. So that whole commanding his children and his household after him, which you talked about with Abraham there in Genesis, is so critical, because I don't just do what I do in front of them, but I actually take time at times to tell them why I made that decision.
Yeah.
What scriptures apply here? What principles from the Word of God apply to this situation? So that later on, if they run into something that is similar or something that they can say, well, that works here, I need to do that same thing. And it helps them to do that. So,
I would say pray much and trust the Lord.
Trust the Lord.
Trust the
Amen.
Lord.
we talked about marriage, and now we're talking about raising children. One of the things we have to know is that you have to pray. You have to pray. You have to take the Word of God and pray that over your marriage. You have to take the Word of God and pray that over your children, over your family, your household. If you want kingdom, the sower sows the Word. You've got to sow the Word.
Amen. Yeah, we are people of prayer in this
Amen.
house. So thank you guys for watching,
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
we'll see you next time.